Hey everyone, haven't done comments on the news on my YouTube channel in a while, and been largely doing more podcasting and all. But if you aren't going to comment on the news today, when are you going to comment on it? And today, obviously, we're waking up to Ukraine being invaded by Russia. And I think what's interesting about this, if you haven't followed, if you're a YouTube, if this is coming to you through my YouTube channel, I have been watching this, and one of my things that I've been notably skeptical on, right? Which is not to say discounting the threat of a full invasion. And in fact, I've talked about that. I've been looking at what might happen there. But one of the things that, as I've been going through this, I've been skeptical that Russia would do the full thing, which it appears they are doing right now. And, right up till yesterday, I was in my head thinking, and talking, trying to get on the record about this, that really is Putin going to do this big full thing, or is he going to keep things more limited? Uh, and all through this, I've been looking at Putin and looking at his moves from the point of view that, hey, he is following the Sun Tzu playbook. He's being opportunistic. He's going to push, and so he's not necessarily committed to a full attack. He's not coming at this in that way. That he is coming at it as opportunistic, and he's going to keep his options open and maneuver. And consistent with that, and that's not at all a weird thing. There are other folks that study Putin more than I do. I study theories about how things act, and this is consistent with the idea of selectorate theory's view of this is how dictators are act and should act to stay in power. The thing though is I thought, hey, he is going to stay in a more gray area, right? That he's going to keep things limited. And at first, when he announced the independence of uh, Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic, recognizing that, I'm like, okay, this is him getting a victory point, right? And at that point, and then even as he started moving troops in, I'm like, well, he can do that. I kind of expect him to push the envelope, but in a way that's more consistent with how Russia's acted before. Hybrid warfare, right? Where they go in and they use forces in conjunction with local forces. So it's never clear who's doing it. They let the local paramilitaries take the lead, or they completely obscure their role like they did in the Crimea annexation, where they had the little green men, they called it. People like, who the hell they're obviously Russians, but they were keeping this disinformation and this question mark over what they were doing, and it was very ambiguous, right? And this was their thing, and I kind of said, yeah, this is their wheelhouse. It makes sense that they're going to push, move the borders out, take over those whole provinces. Yeah, and I kind of said I one reason I thought that was likely to happen was that puts the West on the back foot, right? The you know the U.S. and U.K. have been going way out on a limb, making these dire predictions that the Russians were going to do what they were going to do, and um, you know, in my mind, kind of the worst thing that Putin could do to the West would be to not fulfill those, to do something, gain a victory, but not act in the way that Western intelligence was, and Boris Johnson and Biden and all these folks were the most adamant members, the most vigorous members of NATO, right? Kind of leave them, it kind of what I'm doing now, right? Having to explain why they were wrong, but no, you didn't do this, and That I think is a big, I look at this today and I'm just like, wow, Putin, not angry, I'm just disappointed. You aren't as smart as you have been in the past, I think. And why am I now thinking that, right? Well, but like I said, the reason I didn't think he was going to do all this stuff is that I feel he's just now handing the West this huge victory. He is undermining all of his credibility is in the dumpster now. Western credibility is greatly enhanced. The most vigorous, adamant members of NATO, the hawkish members of NATO, are justified. And this full-scale invasion is going to be shocking, is going to just kind of go beyond this, right? And people are going to, well, we have to see how it plays out, but this is, Europeans are seeing something they haven't seen since World War II. And, when that happened to us in Kosovo, when we were doing the bombing campaigns against Serbia, it was a huge, the Europeans really were shaken by seeing Belgrade burning because that brought up these memories. And so now Europeans are going to be shaken by seeing cities that look like their hometowns and people that look like them with cell phones reporting, we're starting to get that stuff coming out. With Russian tanks right in the background, right? So that, to my mind, is a wow. I was like, wow, I can't believe you actually did this. And yet it was obviously a case. Now, as we go, here's something else, just a little anecdote. Through all of this, my wife has been like, oh no, he's going to totally invade, right? So my wife has been right. My wife's totally right on this. And well, okay, so maybe useless PhD, right? I got 2 PhDs, and right now my post-hole digger looks to be the more useful one, right? But I think this is the point in this that I take, that I look in this, maybe salvage from it, is that my nuanced, informed, academic-y view of Putin was consistent in, but what he did fits into her more stark view of him as just a bad actor, right? And so, and this is the thing, is he's confirmed her view admirably. And that's a huge loss for him, right? That it doesn't take, this view that's going to be very comprehensible to people, right? Very understandable, when it's offered, especially as it is currently being offered on the airwaves, is there. And that, the genius of hybrid warfare is you avoided that, right? You made it more complicated to hang this view as aggressor, as I don't know how my wife would put it. I would put it asshole. But as this threat, right? It's easier, the hybrid warfare avoided that, and now they have it. So this is, to my mind, as we watch what's unfolding, we have questions, right? I think the things that are, how well is the Ukrainian military going to do? Are they going to completely collapse? How well is the Russian military going to do? Because you just came out of your wheelhouse, right? And we gave the Ukrainians a lot of javelins. Anti-tank weapons are very good. And this, but at another level, man, it's hard to fight tanks, right? So we don't know what's going to happen there. Right now, it's a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're going to fight. We're going to," Zelensky is out exhorting people, but it's hard to fight, to mobilize, to turn on a dime and to get there. So we don't know what's going to happen there. But I am all, as I look at this, one thing that I think is very important is when we look at NATO, we look at the US, we look at democracies, right? Democracies are rich. We have the technology. We have the means. to defend ourselves and our allies. It's always a matter of resolve. And democracies need political consensus and commitment. Powell doctrine, right? And it goes back to democracies need to work off the Powell-Weinberger doctrine, not Sun Tzu's, which is what Putin can do, right? Now, I said, this is the thing. Putin has greater flexibility of movement. He will always run rings around NATO until NATO and the West makes up its mind. Well, all right, as we watch Ukraine, how are the events that are going to unfold going to affect the political resolve of NATO and the imagery, the conceptions of Russia, of security interests? How is that going to develop? And I'm really very, very closely watching, what's coming out, right? And how are Europeans seeing this when we see people with their kitty carrier in the subway station trying to evacuate Kyiv? It's jarring, right? Modern images next to these old things, and how is that going to play out, right? And what is that? How is that going to affect the political resolve? And when the Russians, as they go forward, how much violence are they going to do, right? The more violent they are, the worse it is for them. And so this is going to be a big question, and so as we watched the military fight, when we don't really get to watch that, right? That's happening, and we're not getting a lot of reports or reliable reports on what's happening militarily. Maybe that'll change, get a Pentagon briefing or something, but we can watch the politics unfold. And that is, I think, going to be really a very key thing. It's already happening that, NATO is taking on a new role. I think NATO, in Europe, they have to be looking at NATO. Suddenly, we're aware of who the NATO of it. We're hearing about Article 4. We're hearing, which is that has been invoked, where we are going to consult with all these folks. And so, people are going to watch Ukraine and go, what the difference between Ukraine and us is? If you're Estonian, right, and you're 50 miles or so from, or 100 miles from, 50 to 100 miles from St. Petersburg, right, you have a border with Russia, you're going to be like, we're part of NATO. They aren't. NATO! And this is, I think, going to be very important. And so that's what's now unfolding. And like I say, I was skeptical that he would do it. One, I didn't want him, because the Ukrainians are going to suffer. The human suffering that Ukrainians are going to go through, whether it's an occupation or, this is bad, right? We can't take any joy in this. At the same time, it's kind of like, wow, you just handed this political victory to NATO. And I think the political resolve of NATO is going to be stoked on a daily basis. And so long-term, big losses for Russia would be my view. I'm just watching them, going, wow, shake my head would be, I guess, the big thing of like, wow, man, you guys are really, you think you're winning. And this is the big thing. And so we're going to look, how are other nations, Sweden and Finland, the Finnish president was saying, well, right now we don't want to join NATO, but we're going to look. And he said, if it depends on what the Russians do and how they behave afterwards. He said, before all this started, he said, if it looks like a success, if they see a success story, then they're going to be more dangerous, right? That was what he said about Russia. And he's like, at this point, we're not worried about Russian tanks crossing our border. Well, I wonder how Finland is today, and that's the kind of thing I'm thinking, that, NATO's standing is probably being stoked. So there's some comments on the news. I've got, I'm probably going to be, if nothing, just catharsis talking about this. I will be having a podcast with a student later today. I'm sure the topic is going to come up. But I'll try not to write blah 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 on that. So uh, we will just have to keep watching the news unfold.